continue from here. My connection is quite poor tonight. Just hope that we can round up this chapter. So we're told in Genesis chapter 47 from verse 13 to the end. We're told in verse 13 that there was no bread in all the land. Okay. But the famine was very sore, it got more severe, both in Egypt and in Canaan. Okay, and that the people fainted because of the famine. So now I'm now wondering, what if Joseph had not fulfilled destiny? What would have become of his family? Joseph had not fulfilled destiny because he was supposed to, as part of his destiny, he was supposed to find himself in Egypt, and then to serve in Potiphar's house, from there to the prison, and then from there to the palace. But what if he had given in to the temptation of sleeping with Potiphar's wife? What if he had, by himself, by his own hand, okay, sabotaged his destiny? What would have become of his family at this time? What if he had sabotaged his destiny for a few minutes, a few seconds of pleasure? What would have become of his family? Now, there were 70 people who went into the land of Egypt. That is Joseph's family. 70 of them, okay, went into the land of Egypt. Now, because of Joseph, these 70 people were preserved, were saved, and of course they could reproduce. Okay. What if Joseph had not fulfilled destiny? What if he had made himself ineligible to fulfill destiny by giving in to pressure, by seeking pleasure rather than the things of God? What if he had given in to the temptation of sleeping with Potiphar's wife? What would have happened to these 70 people whose lives he needed to save so that they could reproduce? Okay, so that they could eventually make up the nation of Israel. What would have become of them at this time when the famine became more severe than it was at first? So the thing is, we need to be very careful. I know I have said one time, was it when we were studying the New Testament or when we began the Old Testament? I can't really remember what led to that, but I have said before, okay, that our actions do not just affect us. Our actions have a ripple effect. You might think, oh, let me just do this. Let me just do this, and what's life after all? I mean, one has got to enjoy life. So let me just give in to this few minutes of pleasure. But what you do not realize is that you have a destiny to fulfill. And your fulfillment of that destiny is dependent on your righteousness, is dependent on your obedience to the will and the commandments of God. And that there are people who are tied to your destiny, people who are meant to benefit from your destiny. So if you fail in destiny, you fail those people and you leave them stranded, God will now have to start looking for another way to help them out when you could have done the job. In other words, you will be replaced. And God forbid that God should look for someone else to do a job which was originally assigned to me. God forbid. So you see, now Joseph did not know at the time Potiphar's wife was making advances at him that he had such a great destiny, that so many souls would be dependent on him, that the survival of his family was dependent on him. He never knew that, but he knew that doing that would be sinning against God. And for that singular reason, he refused to do it. And he was able to fulfill destiny and save his family. So we need to be careful. We need to be careful. Whatever you do has a ripple effect. Think about that before you take that next decision that you want to take. Think about the souls that are connected to your destiny and what will become of them if you make that choice and fall out of alignment with God's will and God's wish and plan for your life. I pray that the Lord will help us. May He help us to be firm and steadfast in keeping His commandments. May He help us to be true and faithful unto Him. May He give us the grace to fulfill destiny. That will not leave the people who are attached to our destiny stranded. And that the Lord will not have to look for another to take our place and do what we were supposed to do. In Jesus' name. And so we're told that the famine became grievous, became sore. Okay? Now, another thing I want to say is this. One prayer you should pray is, God, single me out. It might sound like a selfish prayer. It might sound like a selfish prayer, but it is not. Lord, single me out for your favor. Single me out for your favor. Okay. Let your mercy that brings favor locate me. May I not be among the crowd. Be intentional about me. Now, after Joseph's family went into Egypt, we're told that the famine became sore, became worse. Okay. But it did not affect Joseph's family. It should have affected them under normal circumstances. If they were still in Canaan, it would have affected them a whole lot. But it did not. Because God was intentional about them. So intentional about them that He placed their own person in charge of the food in the land of Egypt. And He uprooted them from Canaan and brought food was in close proximity, okay, with their family member who was in charge of the food. And so even when the famine became sore, they were unaffected by it. Because God was intentional about them. Because they were Abraham's seed. They were Abraham's own. Okay. If God is intentional about you, He will single you out from the crowd. The things that affect others negatively will not affect you negatively, because He will make a way of escape for you. Before it even happens, He has already either warned you about it or taken you out of there. Okay, I pray that the Lord will be intentional about you, that He will single you out, that you will not be among the crowd. May the Lord make you His own. May He make you His own. The Israelites were His own. Jacob and his family were God's own because they were of Abraham's lineage. So they were special to God. They were His own. So He took care of them. He provided for them. He made a way for them. He planned for them in advance. I pray that God will make you His own, that He will be intentional about you, that He will single you out from among the crowd. While their friends over in Canaan will be, suffering the heat of the famine, they were there in the land of Goshen, being nourished with bread by Joseph at a time when the famine was severe. And that is God for you. May God be intentional about you. And we're told in verse 14 that Joseph gathered up all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan for the corn which they bought. And what did he do with the money? And Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house. We see that Joseph was faithful and full of integrity. And he was not proud. Now, do you see God? Do you see God? I've said before that all that Joseph went through in Potiphar's house, the time he spent in Potiphar's house, in prison and all of that, was to prepare him for his position. He had to be prepared. He had to be trained. He had to be tested. He had to be tried. Okay, because the person who had to be at that place had to be a man of integrity. Now, do you have any idea how much money was coming in to Joseph every day? People coming from far and near to buy food, to buy corn, both in Egypt and in the surrounding nations where the famine was, were coming into Egypt to buy food. So lots and lots and lots of money was coming into Joseph every day. Every day. And we're told that when the famine became more severe, what did he do? He gathered all the money and did what? Took it to Pharaoh. He did not keep it to himself. He did not say, "Oh, let me take after all, I'm the one who interpreted the dream. I'm the one who has been in charge, who has been administering this whole thing. I've been the one stressing myself, doing this, doing that. So I deserve a share of it. So I'll take half and I'll give Pharaoh half." He did not do that. He was faithful and he was full of integrity. And he was not proud. He never tried to make himself equal with Pharaoh, even though he practically had more authority in the land of Egypt than Pharaoh at this time. Yes. Yet, he never saw himself as equal to Pharaoh. Okay. He never tried to rub shoulders with Pharaoh. He recognized Pharaoh's authority over him. So all the money that was coming in, he did not see it as his money. He saw it as Pharaoh's money. And he kept it safe, secure. Okay. Okay, he did not use that as an opportunity. Some people will use that as an opportunity to enrich themselves. Oh my God! If it were to be someone who was not, did not have integrity, then they'd use that opportunity to enrich themselves. To enrich themselves. Joseph could have done that easily. Pharaoh would not even know. That's the thing. Joseph could have taken enough money for himself and given the rest to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh would not even know, because Pharaoh did not. He did not know anything that was happening there. It was all in Joseph's care. But Joseph was a man of integrity, and his integrity did not start at the palace. Even in Potiphar's house, when he was in charge of Potiphar's household, there was never a time when he stole anything. There was never a time when he took anything that was not his. He could easily have done it because Potiphar himself left everything in his house in the care of Joseph. We're told that Potiphar did not know what he had and what he did not have. It was all in Joseph's care. So Joseph could have enriched himself. Potiphar would not even notice, but he did not. So his integrity did not start at the palace. Did not start at the palace. He had always been a man of integrity. And so when you know, the Bible says, he that is faithful in little, okay, he that is faithful in little shall also be faithful in much. Okay. If he was a thief, if he had stolen from Potiphar, if he was someone who was greedy, okay, who was greedy and maybe had stolen from Potiphar and all of that, if for any reason he had found himself at that, he still found himself at the palace, he would still steal. Okay, but he was honest, he was faithful, he was a man of integrity. He gathered all the money and he took it to Pharaoh. And we're told in verse 15 that a time came when money failed. In other words, money finished. The Egyptians had spent all the money they had buying food from Joseph. And of course, now, the thing, what happened was at this time now there was no money in circulation. All the money was going to Pharaoh's house because that was where the food was. Because it was a time of famine, there was no food anywhere, so they could only buy from Joseph. So all their money was going to Joseph. There was no circulation of money. No one was selling and buying and all of that, for the money to flow in the economy. Okay. So even those who were traders could not even sell food. They were taking their money to Pharaoh. So a time came when money finished. All that money failed in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan. Okay? And we're told that all the Egyptians came unto Joseph and said, "Give us bread, for why should we die in your presence? For the money faileth, for our money is finished. Are you going to watch us die? Give us food, give us bread." Say, "Give us bread." Okay. For our money faileth. The thing is, when adversity lingers, money fails. When adversity lingers, money fails. Some of us may have seen that happen in the lives of our loved ones, in the lives of our friends, or maybe people we know, acquaintances, and all of that. For example, you might see someone who is rich. Okay, the person is rich, doing well, and then suddenly the person is diagnosed with one illness, one really serious illness. And the person keeps spending money to treat this illness. Spending money. Just keep spending money. And because the person keeps spending money on this illness, the person cannot even go to work anymore. And eventually the person begins to use their savings still to treat this illness or to manage this illness. And the time comes when the money fails. The money fails. So you'll see some families that were doing so well. Okay, they were comfortable, doing really well. And then someone is diagnosed with an illness, and they start pumping in money, pumping in money, pumping in money, pumping in money to manage this illness. The time comes when the money fails. The family that was doing well, is now struggling to get by. The family that could afford the basic things of life was not a problem for them. They could have afford the necessities and even the luxuries of life. They now begin to struggle to even afford the necessities of life. The money fails. And that happens when adversity lingers. When adversity lingers, the money fails. Imagine someone who is sick for 5 years. What do you think will happen to the money of the family? It will fail. Their money will fail. Their savings will fail. They would spend everything, to treat that ailment. That is what happened with the Egyptians, okay, and the Canaanites at this time. Because the famine lingered. If it was just a famine of 2 years, if it was a famine of just 2 years, 3 years, well, but it lingered. It lingered. And so they managed to get by the first year. They managed to get by the second year. They managed to get by the third year. A time came when the money failed because adversity lingered. Adversity lingered. Okay. And that is what some people are experiencing currently. Their money has failed because that adversity has lingered. What started as just just a small thing, and they just went to the doctor and said, I don't understand how I'm feeling, this is this. And before you know it, that small thing, that small issue, it just seemed like a joke, and before you know it, 2 years have passed, 3 years have passed, 4 years have passed. They are still battling that illness, and all their money is going in there. The time comes when they become paupers. They end up borrowing. And we'll come to see that is what happened with the Egyptians. Their money failed. And so when their money failed, they ran to Joseph and said, give us food. Why? Are you going to watch us die? Give us bread. Our money is finished. We don't have any money anymore. And what did Joseph say? He said, give your cattle, and I will give you for your cattle if money fail. And they brought their cattle unto Joseph, and Joseph gave them bread in exchange for horses and for flocks and for the cattle of the herds, okay, and for the asses. And he fed them with bread for all their cattle for that year. That is exactly what happens. Now, because their money was finished, and they went to Joseph, and Joseph told them, he said, if your money is finished, bring your cattle, bring your animals, and I will give you corn in exchange for your animals. And so they were bringing their animals. They would bring their animals. They had to eat. Food, of course, is a necessity. If you don't eat, you die. They had no option. They had no choice. So they brought their cattle. They brought their cattle. Okay. They would bring, and Joseph would give them food that was equivalent, I guess, to the cattle that they had brought. And that was how they did throughout that year. That is exactly how it happens. Now, that person who perhaps is battling that illness, okay, and their money fails, what do? They resort to borrowing. Borrowing. They start small, just a little sum here, a little sum here, and before you know it, the amount keeps on increasing, and the debts pile up. Before you know it, they are owing debt worth millions because their money failed, because adversity lingered. Okay. Sometimes, in fact, that is okay. Now, before most of the time, before they even resort to borrowing, what happens is that they begin to sell off their properties, and that was the next step that happened with the Egyptians. After their money failed, they began to, give their cattle in exchange for food. So now, this person whose money has failed begin to look around. My car. I think the car is most of the time, the car is the first thing people think about selling when they are, when their money fails. Before you know it, they've sold their car. Before you know it, if they have gold jewelry, they've sold their gold jewelry. Before you know it, they start looking for things, the expensive things they have to sell. And then the less expensive things to sell. Before you know it, they've sold their house because their money failed. That was what happened to the Egyptians. Their cattle went that year because they needed to eat, because their money failed. And we're told in verse 18, and when that year ended, they came unto Joseph the second year and said unto him, "Will not hide it from my Lord. We can't lie to you, sir. Okay, our money is gone. Our cattle is also gone. You have our cattle. Okay, there is nothing left except our bodies and our lands. So, will you watch us die? Will we die before your eyes? Both we and our land?" I wonder what do they mean by that? Will we die before your eyes, both we and our land? Okay, and then they said, "Buy us and our land for bread, and we and our land will be servants unto Pharaoh. And give us seed, that we may live and not die, that the land be not desolate." This is where servitude comes in. Our money is gone. Our cattle gone. Will you watch us die? We need to eat. So take us, take our land. We'll be servants to Pharaoh, but give us food to eat. That's what happens with the person whose money fails. After their money has failed and they've sold their properties and there is nothing else to sell, they resort to borrowing. And a man who is in debt is a slave. A man who is in debt is a slave. Is a slave. Okay. So they said, "Buy our land, or give us food to eat, and give us seed so that we'll plant it, And I think this was toward the end of the famine. It was toward perhaps in the 7th year now. Okay, perhaps in the 7th year. So it was towards the end of the famine. So they said, give us seed. Okay, let us plant so I will not die. Okay, and Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh. That is verse 20 now. So that Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh. For the Egyptians sold every man his field because the famine prevailed over them. So the land became Pharaoh's. We see another proof of Joseph's faithfulness and integrity. Okay, and absence of pride. So he bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh. He never sought to place himself on the same level or above Pharaoh. He always, whatever he did, he understood that he was working for someone, Pharaoh. So despite the authority, the influence, and everything he had, he knew that Pharaoh was his boss. So he bought the land of all the Egyptians. Okay. Now, I want to point out something here. Joseph's family, they weren't Egyptians. Okay, they were Hebrews. Okay, they were not Egyptians, yet they were enjoying free of charge that which the Egyptians were paying for with their cattle and their money. Before they sold their lands, they were first buying food with money. And at the time they were buying food with money, Joseph's family was not, because we're told that Joseph nourished his family with bread. So his family was not paying for food. At the time the Egyptians sold their cattle to Joseph for food, exchanged their cattle for food, Joseph's family did not. Joseph's family did not. So they were in a strange land. They were in another man's land. But those, how do I put this now? Those who were not of the land, those who were not part of the land, who were not from that place, were enjoying free of charge the thing that the people who were of that land were paying for. You see God. You see how God works. Outsiders were enjoying free of charge that which the owners of the land were paying for with their money and with their cattle. That is God. There's only God that has the ability to do that. Under normal circumstances, it should not be so. But God strategically placed Joseph there for the sake of his family. And so, free of charge, what the Egyptians were paying for. Mind you, the corn which Joseph's family was eating free of charge was planted and harvested by these same Egyptians who were paying for it. Yes. It was planted by, they were the ones who planted it. The only thing was that the fifth part, okay, 1/5 of the harvest was collected by Joseph and stored, which was what they were now using during these 7 years of famine. But it was planted by these Egyptians. It was their normal crops, their normal grain they plant, okay? But when harvest, they take the fifth part to Joseph, okay, for storage. So these were the people who planted this thing. These were the people who planted, who harvested this. But they were paying for it at the time of famine. But the people who did not plant it, who were not even in the land when they were planting, they were nowhere near that land when they were planting it. When they were harvesting, they did not till the land, they did not plant it. They were free of charge. What others had suffered and struggled for. And for which the people who had struggled for it were paying. The people who did not struggle for it, the people who did not have a hand in it, who did not work for it, were enjoying it free of charge. That is what is called grace, favor. Grace, favor. And it is only God who can do that. It is only God who can make a man to reap where he did not sow. Okay? It is only God who can make a man reap where he did not sow. Because the Hebrews, Joseph's family, did not sow. They did not plant. The Egyptians who planted this corn were paying for it before they could eat in a time when they needed it most. But the ones who did not plant, who were not even there when it was planted, were eating it free of charge. That is why at the very beginning I said that you should pray if there's one prayer you should pray, it should be let God make you his own. Let God make you his own. Say, Lord, make me your own. If you're God's own, he will make you to reap where you did not. You might think, oh, it's unfair. It's unfair by whose standards? God decides what is fair and what is unfair. So if you say it is unfair, by what standards is it unfair? By whose standards? Yours? Are you God? Okay. He said he will do his will and his pleasure. Counsel will stand. It is who God decides to favor that he favors. It is who God's grace is upon that receives favor. So your prayer should be, God, Lord, let your grace rest upon me. The grace that brings favor. Okay. Let your mercy locate me. Make me your own. Let me be your own. This prayer is important. It might seem what I'm saying now is very important. You might not take it seriously, but it is important. It is important. Okay, it is important. It is only God who can make a man reap where he did not sow. It is only God who can make a man enjoy free of charge something that those who labored for are paying for. Only God can do that. Okay. I pray once again for us that the Lord will make us his own, special to him. And that just like Joseph's family, we will reap where we did not sow. In Jesus Christ's name. And so Joseph bought all the land of the Egyptians when they cried for food. Okay? All the land in Egypt, Joseph bought it for Pharaoh. All the land, including Goshen, where Joseph's family was bought for Pharaoh. Okay. And Joseph then said the only land that Joseph did not buy was the land of the priests. Okay. The land of the priests, because the priests did not have any need to sell their lands because Pharaoh was feeding them. They had their portion of food that Pharaoh was giving to them. You understand? So they were not hungry, like the others. They were not hungry. They were well taken care of, well fed by Pharaoh. So they were not feeling the heat of the famine. So there was no need to sell their land. So Joseph did not buy the land of the priests, but every other land in Egypt, Joseph bought for Pharaoh. Okay. And when he bought the land, he told them, he said, I've bought your lands, so take seed and plant. Okay. And when the famine is over, when you harvest the grain that you have planted, you give the 5th part unto Pharaoh. 4 parts will be your own, and the 5th part will be Pharaoh's. Okay. I think that is I read somewhere that that's about 30%. I think that was like a 30% tax or something. I hope I'm not wrong. Okay, and they told Joseph, say, oh, you have saved our lives. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Let us find grace in your sight, and we will be Pharaoh's servants. Okay, and that was how they entered into servitude. They became servants of Pharaoh. So what Joseph did was to consolidate all the wealth of Egypt to Pharaoh. All the money was Pharaoh's. Nobody had money in Egypt except Pharaoh. Nobody had money in Egypt except Pharaoh. Nobody had cattle in Egypt except Pharaoh. And nobody had land in Egypt except Pharaoh. Joseph made Pharaoh, my goodness. Joseph made Pharaoh extremely wealthy. 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 The thing is, I pray for you. May God give you the grace to recognize the sent man, the man whom God has sent into your life. Pharaoh was Joseph's helper, because of course it was Pharaoh who brought Joseph out of prison, and put him in the palace, made him royalty and all of that. But Joseph was more of a helper to Pharaoh than Pharaoh ever was to Joseph. In fact, Joseph was Pharaoh's helper. Joseph was Pharaoh's helper. And it's a good thing that Pharaoh recognized, because now Joseph was extremely wise. He had the gift of wisdom. The gift of wisdom. Okay. And when he told Pharaoh, he said, set a man. Okay, there will be famine. There will be years of plenty, there will be years of famine. So set a man who will store food, collect, store, and all of that. If Pharaoh had missed it at that point and had said, oh, okay, I'll find someone, there would have been trouble. But thank God that he had the grace to recognize the sent man into his life, the one whom God had sent into his life. And he said, who is wiser than you? I mean, you're the one who revealed all of these things, so be in charge of it. Be in charge of it. That's the best decision Pharaoh ever made in his life. The very best decision he made in his entire life. I was not there, but I say it boldly. Boldly. Yes. That was the best decision he ever made. Because Joseph made Pharaoh extremely wealthy. Extremely wealthy. Extremely wealthy. He knew what to do at every point. He was an excellent administrator. And he was so faithful to Pharaoh. Okay. He was very faithful to Pharaoh. He worked in the best interest of Pharaoh. He worked in Pharaoh's best interest. So he made Pharaoh extremely wealthy. Imagine Pharaoh being in charge of all the money, all the cattle, all the land of Egypt. He was, my God. And of course, that is still the Abrahamic blessing of Abrahamic anointing, okay, for prosperity. Remember, it was on Abraham, it was on Isaac, it was on Jacob, and it was also on Joseph. Potiphar's house prospered because of Joseph. Okay. The prison, we were told that anything Joseph's hand touched prospered. And here we see that Egypt prospered, flourished exceedingly because of Joseph. And Pharaoh was blessed exceedingly, way wealthier than he was, okay, before Joseph, because of Joseph. I pray that the Lord will bring into your life that person who will turn your life around for the better, for the best. And that when they come, the Lord will give you the grace to recognize them. Okay. That you will not chase them away with your bad character. Okay. Now imagine if Pharaoh had wanted to oversee Joseph. If Pharaoh wanted to prove that I am Pharaoh, so I must oversee you. You should take instructions from me. I should tell you what to do. There would have been problem. But Pharaoh himself was a smart man. He knew that this man was wise. So why should I superimpose? Okay, let me let him do his thing. He trusted Joseph, and he did not regret it. So Joseph was Pharaoh's helper. And we see that hunger can make a man accept slavery. Hunger can make a man accept slavery. Because the Egyptians were hungry. They gladly sold their cattle and sold their lands and themselves as slaves to Pharaoh. They did it with joy, with utmost joy. They did it with utmost joy. They said, "Thou hast saved our lives. Let us find grace in the sight of my Lord, and we will be Pharaoh's servants." They were happy to do it just so that they can eat and they can have seed to plant, so that they will not die. Hunger can make a man accept slavery. I know that I prayed the other day that if you lack anything, may you not lack food. And I repeat that prayer today. I pray that if you lack anything, you will not lack food. May you not lack food. May you not lack food, because hunger can make a man accept slavery. Hunger can make a man accept slavery. Okay. Hunger can make a man do that which he ordinarily would not do. Hunger can make a man do that which he ordinarily would not do. Okay? When a man is hungry, he can accept slavery. I say hunger has the power to enforce compliance. I know I said this the other day. Hunger has the power to enforce compliance. I pray that if you lack anything in life, that you will never get to a point where you will lack food. And the Lord always give you food to eat. May He always give you food to eat. There are people who are thieves today, not because they love stealing, because they are hungry. There are people who have done things that they never thought they would do because they were compelled by hunger. There's someone who has food, who has enough money to get them food, and the person says, I'll give you, but you have to do this for me. And because they are hungry, they do it. I pray for you again that if you lack anything, you will not lack food. May the Lord always give you food to eat. In the name of Jesus Christ. And then we're told that the Israelites went to Egypt, and they had possessions and grew and multiplied exceedingly. So we're seeing that prophecy of them becoming a great nation was taking shape, because we're told that they had possessions in Egypt, they grew and they multiplied exceedingly. Their population was increasing really fast. Okay, so the prophecy, the great nation prophecy was taking shape. And we're told that Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. 17 years. Okay. So the whole age of Jacob was 147 years. I pray for you that you will enjoy the season of your rest. Why do I say this? Jacob lived for 17 years in Egypt. He lived for 17 years to enjoy, the company of his son Joseph. 17 years is quite a long time. A child who is born today, in 17 years, that child will be close to adulthood. Okay, close to adulthood. So it's a long time. So at least Jacob enjoyed the season of his rest a little while before he finally died. I pray that you will enjoy the season of your rest. There are people who suffer and suffer and suffer and suffer. And then when they finally enter into their rest, within a short time, they die. So they never really live to enjoy that rest. So such a life is basically a waste. Such a life is a waste. There are people who suffer and suffer and suffer, and they are looking at their rest here. Their rest is looking at them, and just as they're about to enter into their rest, they die. I pray that you will live to enjoy the season of your rest. That you will enter into your rest, you will enjoy it to the fullest. To the fullest. Imagine a woman who has been married for about 30 years and has been looking for a child for 30 years. Okay? And God finally answers her prayers and gives her a child. Even gives her twins. She's overjoyed. She's elated. And 2 months later, she dies. That is what some people actually suffer from that. People who suffer from that. Okay. People who suffer things like that. Or someone is searching for a job, has been jobless for years, and just finally gets that dream job of his. And his life and the life of his family is about to change, about to turn around. And suddenly, a few days after getting the job, he hasn't even received his first paycheck, and he dies. I pray that you will enjoy the season of your rest, that you enter into it and you will enjoy it. In the name of Jesus Christ. So we're told that Jacob called his son Joseph and made him to take a vow to promise him that when Jacob dies, that Joseph will not bury him in Egypt, but will take him to Canaan and bury him in the burying place of his fathers. That should be Machpelah, okay, the burial ground that Abraham bought. Okay, and Joseph made a solemn promise to his father that he would do just that. So that's that for today's Bible study. It was great having you all here. Thank you all for your participation, your likes, your comments, your contributions, and everything. I hope that we got the message that the Lord had for us tonight, and may the Lord give us the grace able to apply His word to our lives. In the name of Jesus Christ. I'll see you all again tomorrow, same time, 8 p.m. Nigerian time. But don't come alone. Invite someone. And as you do so, may the Lord bless you abundantly. Have a lovely night's rest. Sleep tight, sweet dreams. And good night.